The following is intended for informational purposes only. It is intended to supplement classroom training and documentation. It should not be relied on as a replacement or substitute for classroom training with a live expert instructor. This workshop uses ProcessFlow to create a custom registration form. This example registration form is for training purposes only. In no way does it replace the existing base registration form. Welcome to lesson 11 of this Config Tools class. Here we will be working with BO lists. The ability to add a recurring list within a BO. An example that we will be having within our registration form will be a related person list. If you can have multiple related persons related to a person entity, so we would want to have a multiple list of people. And we haven't worked with lists before. We will see how we interact with them within the schema, within the BO schema editor, and also within scripting, how within code we work and we can go through lists and update lists. I'm going to go to my parent. And I'm going to go to the schema. I'm going to say add a section below, and the section is going to be called, let's say, related persons, the same name that we saw on the person entity, related persons. It's going to be placed on the left. And now what I'm going to do is add a child element, and this child element is going to be my data area. We'll look at this data area, which I've already created previously, and we'll look at how I created the list. But let me just include it first, and it's called you will see already here that there's a fragment, and there is something here which is the list element, and it has two fields underneath it, person and relationship type. Let me go to the data area. Let's have a look at how it was defined. You will see that it has a fragment. We'll discuss the fragment shortly about why I added one in. But let's start with the list. The list is a type of element that you can add in, type list, and you have to define where it's mapped and using the CLOB. And that's basically it. It's a repeatable list of elements, and the elements can be person and relationship type. And you have to define the primary key, the elements which are unique for this particular list. In this particular case, the primary keys are person and relationship type, meaning that you could have the same person, which would be the underlying entity person, and different. You could have different persons which are related to like two different names, but they have different relationship types. So it's the combination of person and relationship type which creates the primary key. So the primary key is defined on both. So we have a person and we have a relationship type. And as I said, we have the primary keys defined here. In case of relationship type, we have a business service that we are using to define the drop-down person relationship types. Happens to be that there is a table called person relationship types, but we can't use the table option here because in fact we have different descriptions of the person relationship type, and we want a particular part of the description. What do I mean by that? If I go to the person relationship type here, you will see that there's two descriptions, and if I use just the table definition of the using drop down, I will get this description one, this one, and that's not the one I want. I want the description here. I want the person 2 to person 1, and in order to do that, I needed to create a business service, and luckily that one already exists as a base business service, so I just simply added that one in. So I have a person and relationship type. I am going to default the date, the start date that we saw previously from the process state. And if you saw also there's something called financial responsibility, which is a Boolean. Currently, at the moment, I'm just going to set the Boolean to be yes and not deal with that. But in terms of the user interface now that I'm using a list, automatically you will be able to see the list and the buttons of plus and minus, adding and taking away the individual rows without having to do any extra work. So if I actually go to my process flow and let's say I add in to my individual registration form, I look at my individual registration form now. I will see that I have a list here, related persons. Okay, and we see this plus and minus, and we have all this created for us with a nice section. If I go now to my business registration form, this is the individual one, I will not see this yet, because if you remember, for the business, I need to add in explicitly the data areas. I'm not using an include BO, I'm using include data areas, so I'd have to include the related person list, include the related person data area explicitly. So it won't be there automatically. But one thing that I want to now point out is this fragment. I have a fragment here added in, and the reason why I have a fragment is for the following. Let me first of all show you the reason for having it, and it's to do with actually showing and hiding different sections. If I actually create now an individual registration form, let me just do that again. I was there a second ago. Let's say I fill in an address, and again I'm putting some garbage in just so. Let's say I don't put in any related persons, and I have a look at the user interface. I have an empty section. Truth is, I'd like to hide that related person section. I don't. If nothing exists, why have it? So in order to do that, I need to actually conditionally hide based upon whether the row count for the related person is equal to 0. And in order to do that, we've already seen that we've been, similarly as we use for address type, that we're hiding the address type, the address section based upon the address type being defined. Similarly as well, using a fragment, here we actually use a fragment for that. And that is the reason why, going back to the data area, that we have that fragment. Because in the fragment, we have defined we've defined, first of all, a field called hide related persons. And this hide related persons is going to be filled in, is going to be defined differently for the maintenance and the display map. For the maintenance map, I always want to have it. So I'm going to set my hide related persons to be false. This is actually a Boolean, so I'm going to say hide it, don't hide it. I always want to show this section. But for the display map, I will only hide it if the count is 0. So I have here a little JavaScript function hide related person, and it basically says if hide related persons, this value down below, is set to be false, then return false, otherwise set true. So I'm going to use this function in the display section to to control whether I actually show the section. So if I go back to my BO on my parent, and I go to over here, I can use the function conditionally hide, use a function, and I'm going to use the function hide related person. I'm going to hide it if it's true. If hide related persons is true, then I'm going to hide that section. And if I in this individual registration form, if I let's say remove, save that, you will see that I no longer show the related person section because I'm using that conditionally hide function to hide if the count is 0. So that's the reason why I added that fragment in. So in order to do that, we had to actually update the code on the pre-processing script, which, as you remember, is on the parent. I've set that it will always not hide. I set false to the hide related persons, and for the display map I have this piece of code over here which conditionally sets false if there are actually related persons, but if in fact there are no persons defined, we set it to hide to be true, and as a result the whole section won't be shown. Okay, so this is the reason why I added in the fragment. Now, besides that added code, I had to add in two other things in order that the code should be complete. I added some validation such that if I at the moment do not have anything added in for the related person, it works. But what happens is, let's say if I add a person without the relationship type or the relationship type without the person, then I get an error. So I'm doing some validation over there, and this is the section of the code that does this. And as you see, we're using a for loop, which we're going through the list, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to bring up the list is to show that the fact that we run through the related persons using code like this. We define we have a syntax like for persons in, for all the person records in the particular list of related persons, run through each one of them and see whether they are empty or not. And if I have one defined person without relationship type or vice versa, then I will error. So that is the added validation that I need to do. And then finally, in the actual create the person, we have a need to add in this section over here. Another for, going through the section, a for syntax, going for all the persons within the related person. We are adding in, and we have the plus over here to add in a new record for person and its relationship type, which is coming from the registration form. And then I'm defining for the financial relationship, and for the start date, I'm defaulting it to true and the process date. So as a result of that, if I actually now, let me edit it back one more time. And this time I'm going to add in and keep a particular say that's although this does not, it's called subsidiary company. Again, these names are numbers. but I'm allowing that. I'm going to validate that this person is unique in the system, or bring back one existing, and then I activate, and let's hope that this works. Brings back the address, that creates the address as we saw previously. And you will see that I've created this person called 55. And you will see that I've now have related persons. Angel Food Group is the relationship, and it's a subsidiary company, and the start date is today, and so on, and the financial relationship is set. So you'll see that I've had to add into the create person as well, obviously the ability to add in the related person, taking it from the registration form and adding it to the person. So to summarize what we've learned in this lesson regarding the related persons, we have added the related persons to the parent BO. We have used and shown how we use a list element, which is needed in order to create the user interface with the multiple records that you can have for a list. We've shown that you need a business service to show the relationship type, and we've actually we've used a display service script and a pre-processing service script to check for the existence of the related person, to conditionally hide the section using the JavaScript function that we defined in the fragment. We've added also some validation into the script, into the business object. I mean that we have to have both the person and the relationship type defined. We have then added in the code which needs to be added in order to create the actual the person together with the related persons, and we've actually pointed out that we had to do actually nothing in the case of the individual registration form, because we were using the invoke BO. We're using the include BO in order to add in the elements, so that in the case of the individual registration form, once we had added it to the parent, the section, the data area for the related persons, it was automatically defined in the child. However, for the business registration form, we would have to actually directly add in the section, because we had shown previously that for the business registration form, we were adding directly the data areas and not the business object. So in order for that to work, we would have to actually add in directly, explicitly, the data areas and the section for the related person.